You're listening to Should You Read It? Should You Read It is a weekly podcast that looks at books that can help business owners. I provide critiques and recommendations so that you don't have to wade through everything out there and can get back to running your business. Additionally, with each weekly book, we'll look at how it relates to other books in its field and what ideas cross over along all the books that I have read. In today's episode, we're going to look at When by Daniel Pink. When is all about the timing of events in life. Everything from when is the best time to start something to how should you be organizing your day so you can get the maximum amount of work done. Find a bunch of links in the show notes, including how to purchase it, my original written review, and a bunch of other articles that I'll talk about throughout this podcast. Are you an early riser or are you a night owl? Do you know when you should be doing your programming to have an optimal flow in your work? When is the best time of the year to start something new? All of these questions matter. I started working on my mullet method, which you'll find a link for that in the show notes. And I started working on that because it helped me get so much more done and have less distractions in my day. And I wrote about that as well. You'll find a link to that article in my show notes as well on my mullet method and how I get a lot of work done in the midst of random distractions. Because the timing of your work matters. The timing of your life matters. And that is where When by Daniel Pink is here to help us. The purpose of When is to show us when we should be doing things and how the timing of our decisions and the event of our lives matter. So Pink breaks it up into 3 sections. First is part 1, the day, which is how we feel throughout the day, the ebbs and flows of our positive affect, which we'll talk about in a bit. Number 2 is beginnings, endings, in between. So what is the best time to start or stop something? And part 3 is sinking fast and slow, which is, in his mind, is how time and timing keeps us in sync at work and with others we interact with. We're going to use these 3 sections as a framework for looking at the books. That means we're going to start with part 1, which is what are the optimal times in the day. One of the things that's important to remember as you go through the book is that Daniel Pink is a researcher. So a lot of this book goes back to the research that he has done in many different fields or back to other research that he found in different fields. One of the first studies that he cites is around positive affect on Twitter. We'll go to a quote in the book here, which will give us a definition of what positive affect is. Positive affect, language revealing that tweeters felt active, engaged, and hopeful, generally rose in the morning, plummeted in the afternoon, and climbed back up again in the early evening. What Pink found was that this held true across a number of other studies, and it shows us that we usually feel good at predictable times. In the morning, we feel good. We feel poor at predictable times. The afternoon, we have less concentration then, and our positive emotions and motivation rises after that afternoon slump, peaking at some point in the early evening. Now that you know this, you got to recognize that a lot of the afternoon is a waste on focused deep work. Deep work, as Cal Newport describes it in his book, Deep Work, and there's a link to that in the show notes as well. That means we need to recognize that if we want to do our deep work, we need to do it earlier in our day. Whether or not you're a night owl or a morning person, you need to do it early, close to when you wake up. Here's another quote from Daniel Pink in the book. First, our cognitive abilities do not remain static over the course of a day. During the 16 or so hours we're awake, they change, often in a regular, foreseeable manner. We are smarter, faster, dimmer, slower, more creative, and less creative in some parts of the day than others. So the second thing we need to acknowledge is that even if you think that this isn't you and you can be creative all the time, you're wrong. You're just lying to yourself. So I guess if you want to do bad work, keep it up. If you don't want to do bad work, then realize that. And the third thing we need to realize is that we need to plan our day to match our cognitive cycle so that we can perform the optimal tasks at optimal times. So when I started planning my day, I didn't have this research to back it up, but I started building mine into 3-hour blocks. I work usually from 6 to 9 a.m. when I'm the strongest, and I focus. This is my mullet method, really. I focus. I don't talk to anyone. My wife can't text me. Nobody can call me. I just work. I don't book any meetings then. Then I take a break for 2 to 3 hours where I run, I might hang out with my kids or do something else. I come back to work from around 12 to 3, and this is where I allow myself to have more distractions come in, where I am not worried so much about that focused deep work because it's my mullet method, right? I'm maker in the morning, manager in the afternoon. Reference Paul Graham's Maker and Manager essay, which you'll find a link in the show notes. One of the keys that I find is that long cognitive break in the middle where I get to refresh my brain. We're going to come back to this idea later in Pink's work, but it serves as a Zamboni for my brain, leaving the ice smooth and refreshed, ready to tackle the next tasks. Pink also offers some really interesting research on the realms of schooling, which we'll talk about again later. If you want your kids to do way better on tests, give them a 30-minute break before the test. If you want them to excel in high school, don't start school before 9 a.m. So we're going to talk about this more later, but that just sounds like we do everything wrong already. For the office worker, that means you take a break every hour for 15 minutes. You don't get up and you don't go check Twitter or talk shop with a coworker. You do a lap around the office and go get coffee. Even better, find a quick walk outside in some green space. I wrote an article about this on your 3 tips for the most effective rest when you're taking breaks, which you'll find a link to in the show notes. And Pink also echoes a book called Rest here, about being intentional about the rest you take in the day. So here's a quote from Rest. It says, "Many of us are interested in how to work better, but we don't think very much about how to rest better. Productivity books offer life hacks, advice about what CEOs or famous writers do, but they say almost nothing about the role of rest in the lives or careers of creative and productive people. When they do mention rest, they tend to treat it as nothing more than a physical necessity or inconvenience." You'll find a link to my full review of rest in the show notes. So Pink also recommends naps in the day. He says that after saying he thought naps were really dumb, he says this in the book, that he thought naps were really dumb, but as he looked at all the evidence, he said he just couldn't deny that naps were so awesome for you when he started taking them. Here's a quote from Pink. "Done right, naps can be a shrewd response to the trough and a valuable break," the trough being that afternoon part. And back to Pink. "Naps, research shows, confer 2 key benefits. They improve cognitive performance and they boost mental and physical health." This is where Pink actually brought up the Zamboni reference. That nap, particularly the 20-minute nap where you drink a cup of coffee first, also known as the caffeine nap, that nap, if done right, cleans your brain, leaving it ready to work again. This huge creative benefit of naps is also a key in the book Rest. Here's a quote from Rest. "Sleep scientists have found that even a short nap can be effective in recharging your mental batteries. Naps can even provide an opportunity to have new ideas. Their work shows that you can learn to time your nap to increase the creative boost that it provides, to make it more physically restorative, or to probe the traffic between the conscious mind and the unconscious. Napping, it turns out, in other words, is a skill." So if you're not scheduling naps and regular sleep, like all night good sleep, you're shortchanging every single one of the people you work for. This is all leading us to the unsurprising result that we should no longer idolize people that pull in all-nighters. I wrote about this back in 2013 because all-nighter people are idiots. And we'll link to that article in the show notes as well. And here's a quote from Pink. "Until about 10 years ago, we admired those who could survive on only 4 hours of sleep and those stalwarts who worked through the night. They were our heroes, people whose fierce devotion and commitment revealed everyone else's fecklessness and frailty. Then, as sleep science reached mainstream, we began to change our attitude. That sleepless guy," now Pink uses guy in this, this is anyone, so I'm going to switch out all his male pronouns to just anybody. "That sleepless person wasn't a hero. They were a fool. They were likely doing subpar work and maybe hurting the rest of us because of their poor choices." Now, this is one thing that I try to fault in books or try to notice in books. He's citing a man here. He probably didn't do this intentionally, right? Other books I'll cite, they're citing a woman as, hiding her feelings as another in a previous show. But we all do these things, right? We all, men or women, do this. Women will do this too. The same as men. Try to get ahead to show that they're more committed. Let's go back to the review really though. If you want to do awesome work, then you need to build a schedule that fits into life and when you're working at your best. Pulling long hours really only means that you can't plan and that you're giving up your clients and giving them some of your worst time. They're not paying you for your worst time. They want grade A, super awesome time. And that brings us to part 2, which is titled Beginning, Endings, In Between. This is a section where Pink hammers hard on the typical workday and school day that we have. School mostly starts when it does because it's easy for adults, easy for the parents. Adults are more likely to be able to function well early. So their kids must get up early and must function early, regardless of if it's good for them. Right? This is terrible for teenagers. Yet we insist that they operate totally outside how their body tells them to work because it's not convenient to the adults. Pink cites a bunch of research showing that when you finish college and start your career, it can have a 20-year impact on your income as well. If you start in a weak economy, there are simply less choices. You're less likely to move around to find better pay, less likely to switch jobs because there's just not opportunity for that. There's less room to move up as well and earn more because other people aren't moving around. So there's no pyramid to climb because there's just no vacancies above. So that's a 20-year effect on your income because of the external factors that happened around when you started work. Now, there are 3 principles of successful beginnings that Pink gives us to try and combat some of these things. First one is start right. Here's a quote from Pink. "While younger students score higher on standardized tests scheduled in the morning, teenagers do better later in the day. Early start times correlate strongly with worse grades and lower test scores, especially in math and language." So we need to start our day at the optimal time. For younger kids, it's early, right? I got kids, they were up at 6 o'clock this morning. It's early. For teens and 20s, it's later. We generally all creep earlier again until older age, and most of us are firmly morning people again, like we were in childhood. In episode 22 of Hurry Slowly, Jocelyn K. Glei and Tammy Foreman talk about the idea of core hours. This is the idea that everyone must be in the office from, say, 10 to 3. All meetings are booked during that time. Now, what this does is it allows, say the parents to come in early to start and work till 3 and go pick up the kids from school or go see the kids shortly after school. And it lets, the more often the 20-somethings or the late people that want to go to bed late work at 10, come in, get to all the meetings, and they work late and they just go out with their friends right away. Everyone's allowed to work in their optimal time. Now, something around here is my wife has not been a morning person. It's actually been a bit of a running joke that she needs coffee to jumpstart her brain to make coffee. The kids even sometimes confirm that she's had coffee before they start asking her anything. Now, despite this, she is up at 4:30 with me, and she doesn't actually love the early mornings as a time, but every time she sleeps in, she can't deny how much better the day runs when she's had time to get up early and kind of clear her head and get her day started well. Even just getting up to sit quietly and not doing any work on her business makes her day go better. So for me, it seems like I conned her into being a morning person by showing her how productive she could be. The second way to combat bad starts is to start again. Here's a quote from Pink. Certain dates function like that Shell station. We'll talk about that in a second. They stand out from the ceaseless and forgettable march of other days, and their prominence helps us find our way. Around here, there's a big orange bridge called Bob. And that tells us that the next unnamed gravel road on your right is the turn you need to use to get to a local climbing area. There are no signs for this. It's a landmark just like the Shell station that Pink is mentioning above. We have these temporally as well. January 1st is the start of a new year, so we try new stuff. Still, the most successful time to start things is the beginning of a week or a month or a year. There's actually nothing special about these things, though. It's just a start date for something. Your birthday can be the same thing. It's a start date. The birth of your first child, same thing. A date to start something. Picking when you start something well can increase your success at the endeavor, so make sure you do pick well. Pick at those times that are optimal for us. And the third thing is starting together. So that's where Pink brings up the depressing research that says if we started work in 2008 or 2009 in a down economy, you're likely suffering wage decreases until at least 2029. So starting like 2011 as things picked up, that person is likely doing better than you if you started in 08 or 09. I already talked about why this happens. So we're going to look at Pink's suggestion for combating this instead. Pink suggests that a pre-mortem is the way to go. So a post-mortem looks back at a problem and helps figure out why it happened. The pre-mortem is the same thing, but we look forward at the problem we're facing and we try to plan around the issues that will arise. That means we imagine a failure and the things that happen to get you to that failure, and you build a plan to counteract them. Take a second, do it now. Look 2 years into the future of your work and your life. What's going to go wrong? Why is it going to go wrong? What are you going to do to help ensure that these things don't happen to you? What would it look like to have a life where these things don't go wrong? That's what a pre-mortem is. That's what you need to do to help start properly. So next up is midpoints. We did our starts, now we're at midpoints. Pink tells us here that while there is a midlife slump, it's hardly the crisis that many of us would believe. Mainly what happened is that we dreamed a lot in our 20s about all the smooth sailing we'd have, and we'd have a killer six-pack, and we'd be tanned and toned on the beach, and we'd be like uber rich and stuff. When we hit our fourth and our fifth decades, we realized how much of it was just so fanciful as to be a fairy tale. We spend some time lamenting that and, this loss of expectation, this loss of something we loved and we cherished. And then we learn to be okay with where we are, really. Where you set new goals, and we almost end up being way happier in our later years than we were with our fanciful dreams in our 20s. But Michael Hyatt speaks of this as well in his book, Best Year Ever, and there'll be a link for that in the show notes as well. He says that we often set a goal so far ahead as to be a pipe dream. This is like someone who's severely overweight and out of shape, thinking that they can win the Boston Marathon when it comes up in 12 weeks. It's possibly a stretch for them to even be able to complete the distance, let alone win it. It's just a fanciful goal that you're never going to get to. With that mindset, we have all but given into failure. We've set the bar so high, we can't meet it. Midpoints don't have to be this depressing resetting, though. They can be a boost. So here's a quote from Pink. When you reach a midpoint, sometimes we slump, but other times we jump. A mental siren alerts us that we've squandered half our time. That injects a healthy dose of stress. And when we say to ourselves, uh-oh, we're running out of time, that revives our motivation and reshapes our strategy. For us, that means that we realize it's time to get our shit together. Many of us do get our shit together then. Pink cites a bunch of team research that shows that most teams only get the ball rolling at the midpoint. Little happens before. But when they hit that midpoint the midpoint between a deadline and a start, everything comes together as if by magic. They meet the deadline and they did most of the work in the last half. And really, the time you give a team doesn't matter. It's the midpoint that matters, whether it's like 3 months to do something or a week to do it. The midpoint is what matters. And that's when they start doing the work. Now that brings us to endings, which is our final significant time. The ending of a decade in our life is an important one. You're more likely to run a marathon at 29, 39, or 49 than in any other year of the respective decade. You're more likely to cheat on your spouse as well. It's some sort of proving yourself that you've still got it, I guess, with some random partner before you turn over into that next decade. So here's a quote from Pink. What the end of the decade does seem to trigger, for good or for ill, is a re-energized pursuit of significance. That means we're searching for significance, but this isn't always a good thing. This should be a point of discussion in a marriage. Not to make it normal and okay behavior that you go, find some random partner, but so that both parties can acknowledge the potential and help each other guard against it. The final ending Pink examines is the ending of our lives. Yeah, that was a terrible joke, I know. He contends that the common wisdom is that when we're old, we live sad lives, and we have fewer and fewer friends. This isn't a good thing, but luckily it isn't even true. Let's look at what Pink has to say. He says, yes, older people have much smaller social networks than when they were younger. But the reason isn't loneliness or isolation. The reason is both more surprising and affirming. It's that we choose. As we get older, when we become conscious of the ultimate ending, we edit our friends. That means older people might have a smaller social circle, but it's by choice. They stop spending time with people that don't matter. The people that take up huge amounts of energy become not worth the effort. They prune their friends and are happier for it. This is a good thing, people. This is what we need to be doing even now in our younger days, right? I'm 38 right now. This is what we need to be doing now, and pruning the friends and only spending time with the people that help feed us as well, that don't take as much effort. Now, this brings us to part 3, sinking and thinking. Now, the final section feels to me like a little departure from the theme of the book. It's not that there isn't great utility in the writing, but I struggled to figure out exactly how it fit with the theme of the book and timing. Pink says that as a group with cohesion, we need to sync with 3 things to work if we want this cohesion. Here's a quote from him. Groups must synchronize on 3 levels: to the boss, to the tribe, and to the heart. Let's look at the boss first. The boss is not literally a person in particular. Pink cites a train schedule for meal delivery for people in India. He brings up these people who deliver meals in India and basically there's no boss of anybody. They work it all out with like little marks on tins in the train schedule, and it works fine. There's no phones, there's nothing. So if these people miss the train to town, they can't deliver the lunches they are paid to deliver in time for their customers to have lunch. That means the train schedule is their boss. Here's a quote from Pink as well. The first principle of syncing fast and slow is that group timing requires a boss, someone or something above and apart from the group itself, to set the pace, maintain standards, and focus the collective mind. It can be a literal boss as well, someone that sets out the standards we must adhere to in our work and life. With this section's emphasis that a clock can be a boss, I guess it fits into the book because he said time, clock stuff. But the next 2 ones are the ones that I really question more in the context of Pink's established purpose at the beginning. Number 2 is tribe. According to Pink, this is the second place that we need to be in sync. Here's a quote from him. Belongingness, they found, profoundly shapes our thoughts and emotions. Its absence leads to ill effects, its presence to health and satisfaction. This is a group of friends that has shared beliefs and desires. They congregate around them and they build closeness around a single purpose and around ideas. We use this synchronization to anticipate the reactions of others. I've seen it on the river doing whitewater rescue. Working with a crew or a group of people that knows each other well means there is so little actual discussion because everyone knows the job they have to do. Often the discussion that happens is in such shorthand that many people would never even understand what we communicated. But because we were synchronized over many days on the river and with much communication, we needed little communication in the moment. Sometimes a single hand signal from 50 feet away conveyed the entire rescue plan because you couldn't talk. They were on the other side of a raging river and we knew exactly what to do. So I believe this has a lot of utility, but I'm not sure I see how it fits in with the purpose of Pink's book on timing. But he used the word synchronized, so that's a time word, I suppose. Let's just go with it. The third one is heart. This is the final way we sync. Let's look at a quote from Pink here. Synchronizing makes us feel good, and feeling good helps groups' wheels turn more smoothly. Coordination with others makes us do good, and doing good enhances synchronization. Now, I've seen this at home with my wife. She's gone back to figure skating now, after a number of years off, and she loves it, and the house can feel it. And I'm not saying she's a bear if she doesn't skate, just that she's a bit happier. She has more bounce in her step when she does get to skate for herself, and she doesn't just spend all of her time on the ice coaching. We also see the advantage of being in sync with each other coming out of the happiness advantage. That is linked to in the show notes, my original review on that. Specifically, Principle 7. So let's get a quote from the happiness advantage. The heart of Principle 7, that which we encounter an unexpected challenge or threat. The only way to save ourselves is to hold tight to the people around us and not let go. Now, if we're in sync with those around us, we have more social support. More social support means that when things suck, we are more likely to recover quickly. Those around us, those that are in sync with us, are available to be held tight so that we can survive the storm that's coming our way. Final question as always, should I read When by Daniel Pink? Now, Daniel Pink is a renowned researcher, and it shows in this book. This is not a collection of his random thoughts on timing. When is a book that looks at what the research says about when we should do things and why timing actually matters to us. It's a coherent look at what is actionable things for readers. My only beef with it is that the final section on syncing and thinking just felt out of place to me. There's lots of good utility in it, there's lots to learn in it, but I'm not exactly sure how it fits in the greater scheme of what Pink is trying to get at in his book When. In fact, I think that whole section could stand alone as its own book. It felt a bit grafted into me when it comes to the originally stated purpose of When by Daniel Pink. But should you read it? Yeah, I think it's a must-read book. Thanks for joining me today. You'll find a link to this in the show notes at the bottom. Thanks for listening to Should You Read It? To support the show, you can leave me a review in iTunes or heart or a star in whatever podcast player you use. These help more people find the show. If you want to get more reading done, you should also look at an Audible membership. If you get one using curtismchale.ca/recommends/audible, that will support the production of the show financially. In episode 5, we'll be looking at The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath.